At around 5:30 in the morning, a man who was supposed to be in custody walked out of a Texas hospital. He was not leaving as a patient. He was an inmate, and he was supposed to be under the watch of a correctional officer. His name was Yorlan Rafael Reyes. He had only been in Liberty County custody for about a day. Then suddenly he was gone. At first, authorities were searching the area around a hospital in Kingwood, Texas. They were looking for a man wearing an orange jail jumpsuit and jail-issued shoes. But Reyes would not stay nearby. According to investigators, he moved through Texas, received help from people he knew, and eventually made his way all the way to the Seattle area.
It might be a little bumpy.
For more than 2 weeks, law enforcement searched for him.
60-year-old male,
then
chest
came the
pain started
discovery
an
that
hour
changed
ago.
the case.
He's hypotensive.
Reyes was not hiding in Texas.
Okay, let's move quickly
He
to
was in
Trauma Bay.
Washington State,
We need to get
thousands
these
of
labs
miles
rushed.
from where the
Vitals are
escape
dropping.
began.
Already
And
on it, doctor.
investigators say he had even found work. This is the story of how Yorlan Rafael Reyes escaped custody in Texas, crossed a huge part of the country, and was eventually tracked down near Seattle. This is a real case, and some of the biggest questions about the escape are only now becoming clear. Yorlan Rafael Reyes, 31, was brought into Liberty County custody after authorities said he had been picked up in Madison County. He was being held on an outstanding Liberty County felony warrant. The charge involved the unlawful disclosure or promotion of intimate visual material under Texas law. At this point, Reyes was not a famous fugitive. There was no nationwide manhunt. There was no major escape operation. He was simply a man in custody being processed through the criminal justice system. But within 24 hours, everything would change. Early on July 18th, Reyes suffered a medical emergency. Because he needed medical treatment, authorities transported him by ambulance to HCA Houston Healthcare Kingwood. That decision would become a major turning point in the case. A jail inmate had been taken outside the normal jail environment. Instead of concrete walls, locked doors, and controlled movement, he was now inside a busy hospital. But he was still supposed to be in custody. A correctional officer was responsible for supervising him. And then, sometime around 5:15 to 5:30 in the morning, something went wrong. Reyes got away. Authorities said he fled from the emergency room on foot. When the first public alerts went out, the description sounded almost unbelievable. Reyes was wearing an orange jail jumpsuit. He was wearing orange jail-issued shoes. Some early descriptions also said he was wearing white boxers. And now this man was outside the hospital. Free. The Montgomery County Sheriff's Office was called to assist. The Liberty County Sheriff's Office launched its investigation. Texas authorities began searching the surrounding area. But there was an immediate problem. Nobody knew exactly how Reyes had managed to get away. And investigators did not know where he had gone. Police need to find the escapee before he can create distance between himself and the location where he disappeared. In Reyes' case, investigators immediately began working the area around Kingwood. The Liberty County Sheriff's Office Criminal Investigations Division took control of the investigation. The Montgomery County Sheriff's Office assisted. The Texas Department of Public Safety became involved. The Texas Rangers were also brought into the search. Investigators reviewed surveillance footage. They followed leads. They spoke with people who might have seen Reyes. And they tried to build a timeline. But there was a major mystery. How had a man wearing jail clothing managed to disappear? On July 21st, investigators publicly acknowledged that they did not know exactly how Reyes had escaped or where he had gone. That meant the case was still wide open. The last confirmed location was the hospital. After that, there were questions. Did he remain nearby? Did someone pick him up? Had he already planned where he would go? Was somebody helping him? At that point, investigators did not have clear answers. But they kept following the trail. And eventually, that trail would lead them away from Kingwood. Far away. According to information later released by the Liberty County Sheriff's Office, Reyes did not simply disappear into the wilderness. Investigators say he made his way toward Cleveland, Texas. There, authorities alleged that Reyes entered a residence and obtained different clothing. This was important. When Reyes escaped, he was wearing an orange jail uniform. That clothing made him easy to recognize. Changing clothes would make him much harder to identify. But investigators say Reyes did not immediately leave the region. Instead, he stayed at a nearby residence with people he knew. According to the sheriff's office, he remained there until July 21st. 3 days had passed since his escape. For investigators, this was a major development. It suggested that Reyes had connections outside the jail. People who knew him could potentially provide food, shelter, transportation, or other assistance. But investigators still had to determine exactly what happened. The case was becoming more than a simple escape. It was becoming a journey. And investigators were trying to reconstruct every step. Eventually, Reyes moved toward the Houston area. According to authorities, he went to a property there. And this is where the story took another major turn. Investigators say someone helped him travel toward the Seattle area. That meant Reyes was no longer simply hiding around Houston. He was heading across the country. The distance between the Houston area and Seattle is enormous. It is a journey across a large part of the United States. For investigators, that created a completely different problem. The search was no longer centered around one Texas community. Now the fugitive could potentially be anywhere along a long travel route. Every state crossed meant another jurisdiction. Every city created new places where someone could disappear. And every day gave Reyes more time to build a new life. But the investigation continued. Law enforcement agencies were collecting information. They were following leads. They were conducting interviews. They were reviewing digital information. And eventually, investigators developed a key piece of information. A cell phone number. Authorities believed Reyes was using the number. That phone became extremely important. A fugitive can change clothes. He can change locations. He can even cross state lines. But using a cell phone can leave a digital trail. Investigators followed that trail. And it eventually pointed to Washington state. Specifically the Seattle area. This was the moment the case changed. 4 days, authorities had been searching in Texas. Now the investigation had moved thousands of miles away. Reyes had made it to Washington. According to investigators, he was in the Mukilteo area, north of Seattle. But there was another surprise. He was reportedly working in construction. Think about what that meant. A man who had escaped custody in Texas had traveled across the country and was allegedly living far enough away to find employment. He was no longer wearing the orange jail uniform that had made him so recognizable. He had changed clothes. He had changed locations. And according to authorities, he had begun working. To people around him, he may have appeared to be an ordinary worker. But investigators were closing in. The cell phone information had helped connect Reyes to the area. The Liberty County Sheriff's Office worked with the U.S. Marshals Service. The U.S. Marshals are experienced in tracking fugitives who cross state lines. Now the search had become a federal-level fugitive investigation. The question was no longer, where did Reyes go? Investigators had an answer. The question became, can they find him? By early August, Reyes had been on the run for more than 2 weeks. His escape had started before dawn in Kingwood. Since then, investigators say he had traveled through Cleveland and the Houston area before reaching Washington. The investigation had crossed state lines. The search had expanded. And investigators had finally narrowed down his location. The cell phone information was a critical piece of the puzzle. But technology alone does not make an arrest. Investigators still needed to locate Reyes and take him into custody safely. The U.S. Marshals Service became involved in the final operation. Then, on August 5, 2026, the search finally ended. Reyes was located in Mukilteo, Washington. He was taken back into custody. The man who had escaped from a hospital in Texas more than 2 weeks earlier was no longer free. The journey was over. The arrest brought an end to one of the more unusual inmate manhunts of the summer. Reyes had escaped from custody in Texas. He had moved through several locations. He had allegedly received help along the way. And investigators say he ultimately reached the Seattle area. There, he was found working in construction. The distance between the original escape and his eventual capture made the case especially striking. But the arrest also raised another question. What would happen next? Reyes already faced the original criminal case that had placed him in Liberty County custody. Now there was an additional escape charge. And investigators were also looking into allegations involving threatening messages. According to the Liberty County Sheriff's Office, Reyes allegedly sent threatening messages to several women in Texas while he was on the run. Those allegations could lead to additional charges. It is important to understand that allegations are not convictions. Any new charges would have to go through the normal legal process. But the escape itself had already created another consequence. The jail officer who was supervising Reyes at the hospital was investigated. After an inmate escapes, investigators do not only look at the inmate. They also examine how the escape was possible. What procedures were being followed? Were policies followed? Was the inmate being supervised properly? And were there failures that allowed the escape to happen? The Liberty County Sheriff's Office conducted an internal investigation into the correctional officer who had been supervising Reyes. The officer had worked for the Liberty County Jail for 6 years. Following the escape, the officer was placed on administrative suspension. The internal investigation eventually concluded that the officer had violated multiple jail policies involving inmate transportation and supervision. The officer was fired. But authorities made an important distinction. Investigators said they found no evidence that the officer had committed a crime. The firing was based on policy violations. The exact details of those violations have not been publicly disclosed. That distinction matters. The escape was a serious failure in supervision. But officials did not accuse the officer of intentionally helping Reyes escape. Instead, the investigation concluded that the officer's actions violated jail policy. The most striking part of the story is the distance. Reyes started in the Houston area region of Texas. Investigators say he passed through Cleveland and the Houston area. Then he made his way west. Eventually he reached Washington state. His final known location was Mukilteo, near Seattle. That is thousands of miles from the hospital where the escape began. And it shows why interstate fugitive cases can become so difficult. A local escape can quickly become a national search. Once a person crosses state lines, investigators may need help from multiple law enforcement agencies. That is exactly what happened here. The investigation involved local authorities, state agencies, federal investigators, and the U.S. Marshals Service. The case demonstrates something important about modern fugitive investigations. Running does not necessarily mean disappearing. Every move can leave information behind. A phone can create a trail. A vehicle can be recorded. A person can be recognized. A witness can remember something. And investigators can connect those pieces. That appears to be what happened in Reyes' case. Even after the arrest, some details of the escape remain unclear. Authorities initially said they did not know exactly how Reyes managed to get away from custody inside the hospital. That part of the story has not been fully explained publicly. The internal investigation into the supervising officer found policy violations, but officials have not released every detail. There are also questions about the assistance Reyes allegedly received. Authorities say he stayed with people he knew. They say someone later helped him travel toward Seattle. But the exact roles of those people, and whether they could face charges, depend on the ongoing investigation. There is also the question of what Reyes was doing during his time in Washington. Authorities say he was working in construction. That means he was apparently able to establish enough of a routine to work while authorities were searching for him. But we should be careful not to turn unknown details into facts. There is no verified evidence that he lived under a fake identity. There is no verified evidence that he had a sophisticated escape plan. And there is no verified evidence that the journey was planned months in advance. What investigators have publicly described is much more straightforward. Reyes escaped. He moved through Texas. He received alleged assistance. He traveled to the Seattle area. Investigators tracked a cell phone number they believed he was using. And the U.S. Marshals Service located him in Mukilteo. Those are the facts currently supported by reporting and law enforcement statements. The escape of Yorlan Rafael Reyes was not a Hollywood-style prison break. There was no tunnel. No helicopter. No secret underground passage. No elaborate disguise operation confirmed by authorities. It started in a hospital. A prisoner who was supposed to remain in custody managed to get outside. And from there the situation grew. The first search focused on Kingwood. Then investigators followed the trail through Cleveland and the Houston area. Then the trail moved across the country. Finally, it ended in Washington state. The case is a reminder that a fugitive does not necessarily need to hide in a remote place. Sometimes the bigger challenge for law enforcement is simply finding the person among millions of ordinary people. A busy construction site. A neighborhood. A highway. A city. A phone. A single piece of information can change everything. In this case, investigators believe the cell phone number helped them find Reyes. And when the U.S. Marshals Service located him in Mukilteo, the more than 2-week manhunt was over. On July 18, the search began with an inmate disappearing from a Texas hospital. At the time, investigators did not know where he was. They did not know how far he would travel. And they did not know how long he could stay ahead of them. More than 2 weeks later, the answer was thousands of miles away. Washington state. A completely different part of the country. A place where Reyes had reportedly found work. But distance was not enough to keep him hidden. The investigation followed the trail. The cell phone information gave authorities a location. And the U.S. Marshals Service helped bring the search to an end. Yorlan Rafael Reyes was back in custody. But the case does not end with the arrest. There are still legal questions to answer. There are still allegations to investigate. There is still the question of exactly how the escape happened. And there are still questions about everyone who may have helped him along the way. For Reyes, the road from Texas to Washington ended in handcuffs. For investigators, the case became a lesson in how quickly a local escape can turn into a nationwide manhunt. And for the public, one question remains especially striking. How did a man who walked out of a Texas hospital in an orange jail uniform manage to travel thousands of miles before investigators finally caught up with him? The answer was not one single trick. It was a chain of movements, contacts, and decisions. And eventually, one of those decisions left a trail. A cell phone. A location. A lead. And finally, an arrest. This was the story of Yorlan Rafael Reyes. He escaped custody in Texas. He traveled across the country. And after more than 2 weeks on the run, he was found thousands of miles away.